Hermod, the Spirit of War, is Necromancy's first and only mid-level boss. If you want to upgrade your power armor for Necromancy all the way from tier 70, 80 up to 90, you'll be farming this boss a lot. Also, if you want to just hone up your Necromancy rotations and try out new things, you'll be fighting him a lot too, so buckle up, let's get into it. Before we get started, I want to mention really quickly who this guide is intended for. There are a lot of players, especially with higher level gear at this point, getting 20-second or less Hermod kills super easily. There are also a lot of players who are used to a more full revolution approach and are finding that hard with Necromancy because honestly, Necromancy is not really full revolution friendly at all. So there are players out there who are struggling with a boss, even as simple as Hermod, who only has 2 special mechanics to worry about. For that reason, A, I made this guide. B, I really recommend and really like Hermod as basically a nice combat dummy for practicing your Necromancy rotations and playing around with different things. No matter what you try out, no matter what you play with, you'll probably get similar kill times, but you might find something that works a little bit better for you. And there are just some tips and tricks to know if you're new to Necromancy that can really help your combat, save you adrenaline, things like that. So, I will recommend the best I can from my own experience of as close to full revolution as you can get with Necromancy, and from there I'll recommend other more manual ways to speed up your kills and just use your Necromancy abilities a little bit better than a full Revo bar would. Now, in order to access fighting Hermod, you need to defeat him first, an easier version of him in the Spirit of War quest. I have a separate guide for that. And for that, you only need level 65 Necromancy, but for farming or practicing on Hermod, I recommend getting to at least level 70 Necromancy and getting the tier 70 weapons at the very least. This is because the damage you do from your weapons will be considerably better, the gear is a little bit better, and the tier 70 weapons from that point forward have a special attack that does a ton of damage if you're in a pinch for a very low adrenaline cost. If you are waiting to farm Hermod for the full up to tier 90 power armor, you might as well wait until you get tier 90 weapons because just with the way that the rituals work, it's better. I won't go too much into detail here, but you can get more bang for your buck when you ensoul subjugation robes. Basically, if you wait till tier 90 or even level 99 Necromancy, you'll get more ensouled materials out of each subjugation piece because of the way that multiply glyphs work and how many of them you have access to. Anyways, I do recommend getting as early as possible at least 5 Hermodic plates to get a full set of tier 70 power armor. And from there, maybe waiting until tier 90 if you really want to farm him. Unless you're trying to complete that quest also, that old black magic, and you need the drumsticks drop. Okay, that's enough of that preface. I have only one more tip, pre-combat tip, before we actually fight Hermod, which is to summon your conjures, conjure your conjures, before the fight starts, and use the Ghost's ability, which you should have. Here's the thing if you don't already know. The Ghost costs 30% adrenaline to summon. The Zombie, if you have access to it, has 50% adrenaline cost. And the Ghost special attack, or command move, is really good. It boosts your damage by a lot, but it costs 70% adrenaline, which is a lot. And if you're using that mid-combat, it's not really worth it. However, if you conjure your spirits before the battle starts, they cost no adrenaline. And you can even use the Ghost's command that normally costs 70% adrenaline for free, as long as it's before the fight starts. So my recommendation is to make sure you summon the Ghost, summon the Zombie, and then command the Ghost for the special right before the fight starts, and time that as best as you can. It took me a while to figure this out, by the way, so most of these kills you'll see me summoning the Ghost or the Zombie or the whatever mid-fight. And before level 84 Necromancy, you can only have 2 conjures out at once, so I played around between having the Skeleton and Zombie, Ghost, Ghost, Skeleton, etc. Just for you to know as you watch this. Okay, now for the fight. I'm going to go over Hermod's 2 simple mechanics very briefly, and then I'm going to go through rotations that I have used that I found good for basically each tier of gear. So, Hermod's first special move that you'll see is the spinning sword smash. It takes a while to build up, and the way you deal with it is basically you move out of the way. You should see little green fires underneath you. Just move away from those, so about 2 tiles over. You'll see a lot of times in these my early kills in these recordings that I messed it up. It's fine, I just wasn't paying attention. The worst thing that happens is that he disables your overhead prayers, so Soul Split or Deflect Necromancy, whichever one you have up. You'll have to turn it back on after a few seconds, and you take a big hit up to 2,000 or 3,000 damage. All that to say, it's not the end of the world if you get hit by this, but if you get hit pretty consistently, you might be digging into some food and having shorter runs. Regardless, this mechanic is good. A good way to practice watching out for a special mechanic and then dealing with it while you're in the middle of another rotation or whatever else you were doing. That is a good thing to get used to if you're not already for other more difficult bosses in RuneScape. The second mechanic you'll see later on into the fight that you'll start skipping as you get faster kill times is that he summons 2 Armored Phantoms. Don't worry, they are much weaker than the Armored Phantoms in the dungeon north of Fort 4 and 3. But while they're alive, Hermod takes no damage. He's immune to everything, so you just have to kill them first. Even if you just single target them one at a time, they go down pretty fast because of their low HP, and they don't hurt you very badly at all. But there are a few ways to deal with them a little bit faster. If you have a zombie conjure out, that'll help because it does passive area poison damage to everything within 4 tiles of the primary target, I believe. You can also use the Threads of Fate incantation, the spell, if you've unlocked that through the perk tree. That, for 4.8 seconds, makes all of your single target attacks hit everything within a 4-tile radius, so you can kill them both very quickly that way. And then there are actual Necromancy abilities that are area target. The most basic one that you should have unlocked already because it takes nothing to unlock it is Soul Strike. If you don't mind having that keybound and not on your hotkey bar or whatever, you can fire that off. Once the zombies are close to you, they'll take small area damage. The other better option that is my favorite is unlocking the Spectral Scythe, as many tiers of that as possible, and using that to just wipe out the Armored Phantoms quickly. That does take a bit more adrenaline though. And that's about it. You just rinse and repeat that until Hermod is defeated. And let's get into exactly how to defeat him. So, what I'll start with is this, my Revolution bar for single targets. Now keep in mind a few things. This is my tier 90 Revolution bar, and it is not full Revolution. There's a lot of manual input required here. But that being said, this should still work for a tier 70 rotation with tier 70 abilities as well. Keep in mind also that this is probably far from optimal. Necromancy is still relatively new, and I am still playing with it, and I did not have this rotation throughout all these videos, but this is what I recommend. Now, if I wanted to make it more full Revolution-y, I would recommend something like this. The reason full Revolution is not great with Necromancy is because a lot of abilities, or the better abilities that drain adrenaline, do not really have a cooldown. Like the Finger of Death and the Bloat ability. As long as you have the adrenaline for them, they will fire off nonstop. And that makes it very difficult to build adrenaline for an ultimate like Death Skulls or Living Death once you've unlocked that. Regardless of your approach, I strongly recommend having all of these strong Necromancy abilities on hotkeys somewhere. Starting with Finger of Death, Death Skulls, Living Death if you have it, the 3 conjures, the Skeleton, Ghost, and Zombie, Bloat because it's great early in the fight, and the Spectral Scythe. You can also keybind Soul Sap, Soul Strike, and Volley of Souls if you want and if you have space, but those are less critical to me. These are recommendations only for if you're really having trouble finding a good Necromancy rotation. If you've got one that you're comfortable with that does pretty okay, use whatever works best for you. Now, as I mentioned before the fight even starts, I really suggest that you conjure all 3 spirits, conjures, and use the Ghost's special because it will boost your damage by a lot. And this is one of the best things you can do to speed up your kills because from what I've seen, so this ability doubles the damage that your target takes, basically for the duration of the fight that the Ghost is alive for, from my experience. From everything, doubles the damage up until a certain point, like 35% of your ability damage or so. The thing is that this includes your summons damage, and it includes, from what I am seeing, poison damage and the zombies' poison damage. So a lot of extra hits will have a lot of extra damage added to them, and it's, as I mentioned, one of the best things you can do to speed up this whole fight. However, that's only the case if you manage to pull this off before the fight starts at the cost of 0 adrenaline. And I do recommend starting each fight with full adrenaline. The Persistent Rage Relic is really good to make sure that you restore all your adrenaline between every fight, because you should be leading each fight with Death Skulls, or Living Death if you have it, but since we're talking tier 70 first, lead with Death Skulls. That does a ton of damage. From there, I recommend using Bloat as quickly as you can when you get 20% adrenaline again, because it has a very long bleed. And from then, my basic strategy is to build up Necrosis stacks with Touch of Death, and then use Finger of Death whenever I have 6 or 12, because Finger of Death will use up 6 stacks of Necrosis, and when it does that, it costs you 0 adrenaline. Otherwise, it costs 60% adrenaline, and that's only reduced by 10% for every stack of Necrosis you have. And Touch of Death gives you 4 stacks of Necrosis if you didn't know. So that's kind of the full Revolution approach. Also having the Skeleton Conjure up on your ability bar helps, so that the command is fired off often, because the Skeleton does a ton of damage when its command is fired off. And after that, that'll be your all that stuff will be your primary damage, and the rest will be supplemented by the Necromancy basic auto attack and the Soul Sap and Soul Strike, or preferably Volley of Souls. The only thing that really changes between tier 70 once you get up to tier 80, besides the increased damage from your tier 80 weapons, is that you should have Living Death, the ultimate ability. Start whatever fight, I guess like every other fight that you can with that, or if your kills are taking longer, it will be every fight. The reason I say that is that the cooldown of Living Death is 1 minute 30 seconds, as opposed to 1 minute like usual ultimates. But what that does is it strongly empowers Death Skulls in that it reduces the cooldown down to 12 seconds instead of a full minute, which is huge. It also has various effects on your Necromancy basic attack, your Touch of Death, and then Finger of Death does a ton more damage. And the Living Death effect lasts for 30 seconds, which even for a slow kill will be the majority of the fight. And then whenever Hermod spawns and Living Death is on cooldown, you would just lead with Death Skulls and then go through your regular Finger of Death and maybe special attack of the weapon and bloat, etc. This is a great point, I mean tier 70 or tier 80 at least, to start playing with getting more abilities off of full manual if you're not yet. I'm not doing it perfectly here either. I forget to use bloat most of the time, even though it's a great thing to lead with, and I forget to count my necrosis stacks because they're kind of lost in the buff bar at the moment. I hope they fix that. So yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but this is the perfect playground because Hermod will not hurt you too badly. He's just a big training dummy with some mechanics for you to have extra good practice. Now, when you get to tier 90 weapons, not much changes besides that you kill him faster. Really no, at least I didn't have very many changes to my rotation, if any at all. The big change happened in the meantime, which you'll see in my tier 90 kills here. There's a big difference in kill times, and it's not just from the upgrade of weapons. It's from the Igneous Kal-Mor cape, the Necromancy cape that you get from the fight Kiln, and then upgrade with an Igneous Stone from a flawless Zook run, normal mode or hard mode. I do have a guide for that, by the way, with a very basic magic setup with very low DPS. If you've already killed Zook before for other Igneous Stones and you're used to that, there's good news because you don't have to use low-level Necromancy to do that. You do have to use your Necromancy, at least for the most part, in order to get the cape from the fight Kiln. Because remember, the Kiln cape that you get is awarded depending on which style you did the most damage in. So I went ahead and got my Kiln cape with tier 70 gear, if I remember correctly, and it took about 45 minutes. I actually even failed one time because I messed up a keybind like halfway through, and that was really annoying. If you wait until you get tier 80 gear, the Kiln will go a little bit faster, much faster for you actually. That is also a pretty good playground, a little bit more intense than this to test out your basic Necromancy skills, but the earliest that you can get the Igneous Necromancy cape, the better, because it reduces the cost of Death Skulls to 60% adrenaline from 100, and it makes 2 extra skulls bounce out, bringing it from 4 hits to 6. And that all is massive, because even if you're still going full Revo with it, you can have Living Death at the front of your bar and then Death Skulls right after it. And the strategy then is to just keep adrenaline abilities off of your bar besides Death Skulls, and just use Living Death, build up adrenaline, use Death Skulls, build up some more adrenaline, maybe fire off another ability or two, and then fire off Death Skulls again after 12 seconds. And typically in one rotation of Living Death, you can fire off 3 Death Skulls, and then even when you're off, even when Living Death goes away, the cooldown of Death Skulls is still at 12 seconds for the next time you cast it. So you can fire off a ton of Death Skulls after a Living Death duration, rotation, whatever you call it. And that will mostly clean up Hermod. In the tier 90 gear kills that I have here, I didn't really do anything in between Death Skulls with the Living Death rotation, other than maybe like 1 Finger of Death with necrosis stacks just to make sure they don't drain adrenaline, and 1 like skeleton command. So get the Igneous cape as fast as you can. If you're overall low level and Zook is out of the question, that's fine, train up to it. Again, one of my most popular videos is actually my Zook guide for beginners, so feel free of course to reference that if you need help. But otherwise, this is Hermod. You will need 30 Hermodic plates, untradeable Hermodic plates, if you want to make the full gear upgrade of Deathdealer power armor from tier 70, 80, all the way up to 90. So if you want all that, you will be here a while. It is good to learn Hermod. And as mentioned before, if you want to complete that old black magic quest, you need to kill him a bunch of times for those drumsticks. I don't know how common they are now. They nerfed the drop rate, thank goodness. But yeah, you'll be here for quite a bit. That's all I have to say on this matter. Please keep an eye out for my other Necromancy videos and just general other RuneScape 3 helpful videos. If you enjoyed this and you do want to see more guides like this, please consider liking this video and subscribing. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate you very much. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.